Yeah. So we're live right now. I'm about to unleash some tweets, letting people know we're about to do this.
It's
Already
weird to
got
be
people.
live before we've shared.
Yeah, there's already some people in the chat.
Well,
Fritz
hey,
says,
hello,
I,
people.
I love seeing your channel grow. Congrats. Thank you, Fritz. I've been seeing you in the chat in the past few weeks. Okay, so I'll just get started then.
Get started while
Everyone,
I share.
while you what? While you share? Oh,
While
yeah.
I
Okay,
share it,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go speak.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Welcome to another Third Apron podcast. I am your host, Yossi Goslin, back with me, as usual, Sam Quinn. And we are getting to, it feels like August already in terms of NBA time. Just no real transactions. I don't think. What was the last big move we had?
Um, when did Chris Paul sign? Was that the last big thing?
But was
Did
that
Lillard
really
happen
like
after Paul?
the thing is with this offseason, there's been too many prelude uh moves, like stuff that we've known was going to happen for 2 weeks. What's like the actual most recent move that's not like a minimum signing that like actually kind of came out of nowhere, whether it was a signing or a trade?
The John
Uh,
Collins Norm Powell trade, maybe?
yeah, I guess that was it. And I remember leading up to that, there was like a big lull. There was like nothing going on for like a week. Uh, Definitely one of the faster free agencies, but now we are in, yeah, it's the end of free agency. Right now, we're just waiting on the restricted free agents to do stuff. We've been getting very small updates. Once in a while, we hear that Kaminga might get an offer, or that we hear the intimate details about that. So until then, those are basically the big moves. Those are the big loose ends. So in the meantime, we'll get into some fun stuff. Um, and this is something that you wrote about a week ago. You ranked every single front office. How many times have you done this now?
This is the second time I've done it in like this iteration. I did it at the trade deadline. The plan is going to be to do it every year in the weeks after the trade deadline and then the weeks after like the initial offseason flurry. So like mid-July every year. And like, sure, sometimes we get stuff in August or September. Like last year, we got the Karl Anthony Towns trade. If I have to make amendments in the middle of August or September, like I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But the basic plan is after the trade deadline and then after the major portion of the offseason every year.
All right. So I've got it pulled up. Everyone, you can see the link in the description. And I'm checking out your criteria. You are evaluating track record, overall vision, creativity, current success, willingness to spend money, alignment between stakeholders, drafting, trading, value in contracts, coach hiring, ambition, self awareness, luck, whether or not there is a clear hierarchy in decision making. Do you have like a 1 through 10 type of thing ranking each criteria? Like, was it like
No,
that's
the thing about it is it's so subjective, right? Like there are some of these things you can't really judge, right? Where like right now, I'll give you an example. I think the Rockets are the best team when it comes to contracts. Like I think their negotiations over the last few years have been like really, really incredible. They consistently get value. But how do you rank alignment, right? Like how do you rank some of the more nebulous things, ambition, stuff like that? It's a little bit vague, and you're gonna have to kind of trust me as I add all this stuff up and divide in my head.
so? And then let's see what else you put. Okay, so you have your criteria defined. So the closest I've ever done, the closest thing I've ever done to ranking front offices or organizations, when I was with Hoops Hype, I did this project where I measured a team's net, like like a net worth, but in terms of like the players you have and the picks you have and how valuable they are. um, I kind of had this system where I'm like, okay, well, this player's worth X amount of picks. This pick is like more valuable than this one. They have the X amount of picks, and I kind of put it all together to measure what they have and who has like the most value, basically. And I might bring that back on Third Apron, but maybe actually have like a more like actually have like an algorithm, maybe something like to have an actual metric to measure that. Um, but with that, it's kind of similar to these these rankings that, and we're not, and you're not the only one who's done these. But like what I came out with, it's like, okay, I'm not really ranking the front office. I'm just ranking like what the team has, because different iterations of a front office could come in and bring in the players and the picks. And I think that's just like an interesting barometer. And obviously with this, because the front offices can change, we have to look at different things.
The
Um,
basic premise, what I'll say is, it's ranked like who would you want running your favorite team, right? If you knew nothing
yeah,
else, if you didn't know about the market, if a history, anything like that, you're just saying the people running this team, who would I want to run my favorite team? That's kind of what I'm going for, right? Like, nobody's gonna be surprised by this. The Thunder are number one. Any fan who knows anything about the NBA would want Sam Presti running their team. Like, that's it. That's like the definitive answer. Sorry to spoil number one, but I'm pretty sure you guys knew where I was going with that. That's the idea of this list. Who would you want to run your team?
yeah. So, and with a lot of these selections, there's some new front offices, so a lot of them we don't have too much to work with. So a lot of it is going to be a little subjective, where you do need to look at, uh, if it's a like a veteran front office, what their history is. If it's like a newer one, all right, then what have they done so far, even if it's just like a brief amount of time. So you already started with the Thunder. Should we just end the discussion there and move on to somewhere else? Anything else you want to touch on them with?
I mean, they're the best. If we're gonna start at the top, I mean, they're the obvious one. Are we starting at the top or are we starting at the bottom?
I want to start at the bottom.
Yeah, I think that's
Let's
more interesting.
uh I feel like we should get that out of the way, but also I think it will have more discussion, and as we go up, we'll probably be in a lot more we might be in a lot more agreement, and just it'll be a lot smoother. So, if you're all here, once again, we're gonna go over Sam's front office rankings that he put out last week, and we're just gonna discuss each team. The link is in the description, and we're gonna go bottom up. Start with his bottom tier of teams. So overall, and I'm looking at it, I pretty much agree with the bottom tier, like the bottom 5 teams that you have put. The order may not. I think the order is debatable. But I think, like, as far as what that 5 is you have there, I'm in alignment with you. But I will say, as far as like the bottom team right now, I guess the one that I would probably least want to run my front office probably would be the Pelicans, that you have 30th.
Yeah.
I think with their, like, I didn't expect too much. This is one where, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we had a lot of pessimism based on the history of who's taken over, and I didn't expect too much. But in a short amount of time, they already did some pretty head scratching moves, putting in pretty nicely in a short amount of time. And just based on their history, I think they just kind of confirmed our fears. So I'm with you
Yeah.
on them being 30th.
So, I mean, you were in Vegas. Like, we both talked to people. The tone when you talk to people about the Pelicans, the tone isn't like what it is for the Suns or for the Kings or for normal teams like that. It's almost like I don't know quite how to put this, but it's like they're not even trying, right? Like, that's kind of how it feels. Where you bring in Joe Dumars, who has not run an NBA team in 10 years. If you look at his track record with Detroit, it's a very, very strict, like, before and after good and bad. He takes over the team, I think, in the late 90s. And those first few years are good when he gets Joe Dumars, or when he gets Ben Wallace and Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton, builds the championship team in '04. I've covered this extensively at CBS Sports. Once they win that championship in 2004, the Pistons fall off a cliff and are like immediately the worst run team in the NBA or close to it. So he has a 10-year track record after winning the title of being a bad GM. Then he's out of the league for 10 years. That's not somebody you should be hiring to run your franchise, Who does he bring in as his deputy? It's Troy Weaver, who I swear his Pistons team won like 50 games in 4 years or whatever it was when he was the GM of the Pistons. Ironically, two bad Pistons GMs are running the Pelicans. And I think we also have to talk about ownership, right? Like the reputations around the league, the two teams that you always heard as like these are the two really preposterously cheap teams, just in the ways that they operate on a day-to-day basis, not just player salary, but like, you know, your staff behind the scenes, the amenities for the players, that sort of thing. It was always the Hornets and the Pelicans. And I'm talking about the Hornets, to be clear, when Michael Jordan owned them. Since they've been sold, they've improved. That kind of leaves the Pelicans alone on an island. The stuff that DeJounte Murray said about what it was like to play for the Pelicans this year was really concerning, right? Where he's talking about he's struggling to get time with trainers, he's struggling to get time on the practice court, like stuff that is really basic that no NBA team should be messing up. The Pelicans are messing it up. The moves they made this offseason, we'll start with the really obvious one, which was the unprotected Pelicans Bucks pick. I'm calling it the Pella Bucks pick. That's Pelicans with Bucks swap rights unprotected to move up 10 spots for Derek Queen. That's like one of the worst trades I ever remember in terms of value in the moment, right? Like maybe Derek Queen does become that good, but if you think Derek Queen is good enough to justify trading that much, you should have taken him at number 7. It's kind of that simple. Then you have the Jordan Poole trade where they add $40 million in bad money that no other team wanted. There was the Pacers trade, which I don't know why you're making that before the finals ends. That's all risk, no reward for you. I don't get a single thing that they've done. I have no idea what the strategy is, what the vision is. Everybody there just seems very checked out. I really feel for those fans. It's like I've never actually believed this about an NBA team, but it kind of feels like the plot of the movie Major League, where the team is like, if we're bad enough, we can move to a better market. Like, that's how bad it feels in New Orleans right now. I don't have any understanding of what they're doing. I thought the Bulls were an obvious number 30 last time I did this list. The Pelicans were, I didn't even have to think about it. It was just like the moment they did everything they did, it was like they're just the clear number 30.
So a couple things. First, someone in the chat asked, "Can I introduce the bottom 5 teams?" Yes, I should have done that. So your bottom 5, 30th are the Pelicans, 29 are the Bulls. Oh, I gotta scroll down. 28 are the Kings, 27 the Suns, and 26 the Mavericks. So okay, that's number one. These are the first 5 teams in that bottom tier. But let me ask you this then, because you mentioned about how organizationally they seem pretty light in terms of basic infrastructure. So are you also accounting for stuff that necessarily isn't? It's like more organizational as a whole that's separate from a front office. Are we doing that as well?
Yeah, I guess you could call these organization rankings if you prefer
Okay.
that. I put that under the ownership banner. Like, as an owner, are you willing to invest in the infrastructure you need to invest in order to like build a sustainable
Okay.
organization?
No, I think that's an important distinction, because if you're just ranking like a front office in terms of what they can, there's only certain things they can control. If we're talking about like both the front office and the organization, then there's a lot of ownership involved. So unless a lot of organizations, yeah, the ownership very much is intertwined with the front office, but that's not
So
the case with everyone.
let me just say there's a reason these are not GM rankings. When you've been in the league at any level, when you talk to people, the first thing any GM will tell you is that like half of their job is convincing the owner to go along with their plan, right? Like there are smart people who have been GMs who have failed in building good teams because of issues with ownership. There are bad owners that we're going to talk about, and especially at the bottom of these rankings. So it was very explicitly not just GM rankings, because you do have to account for
Yeah.
ownership, infrastructure, for the weird dynamics that exist within any organization.
Okay. I would just say that then it kind of changes a little bit about maybe the order in my mind for some of these. Because so let's move on then to the Bulls, for example, which you have them 29th, and I also don't really have too much of a problem with that as well. Um, I think just the biggest problem with the Bulls is that I don't feel the need to like criticize them too much, because ultimately, when you look at every single team and what they're trying to accomplish, like we're in agreement that the Pelicans are like doing a worse job in terms of like losing transactions, stuff like that. But at least I kind of think they are, I feel like they have a little bit more of a vision. I don't really see any vision with the Bulls out of any other team. Like, I don't know what it is they're trying to accomplish. I don't know what it is they're trying to do. So while like everything has just kind of been like flat, like they haven't been necessarily like losing transactions horribly or anything like that. It's more concerned that I just don't know what they even want to do. And I think that kind of speaks volumes enough.
They're the least ambitious team in the NBA, right? They are the team that is satisfied being a 10 seed every year and just making the play in, because they make so much money in that market in Chicago that if you sell out the building, and it's not hard to do that, you just have to not be like one of the worst teams in the NBA, you'll turn a big profit and everybody will be happy. And they don't want to pay the luxury tax. They just want to be decent at as low a payroll as possible. And like, okay, you can be a good front office and be cheap, right? We're going to talk about Indiana later. The Pacers are a pretty well known team as far as being stingy with payroll, but the Pacers make the most of every resource they have. So they're ranked very highly. They just made game 7 of the NBA Finals. The Bulls, you pair that cheapness, that lack of ambition and ownership with a front office that I think just makes bad decisions when it comes to players, right? Like you look at the trades they made this year, their big trade was trading Zach LaVine, and the asset they got back was their own first round pick that was protected in such a way that if they had just tanked properly, they wouldn't have needed to trade for it back, right? They trade Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. Already, we think that's a bad trade, but like I guess that I do have to give them some credit for negotiating with him actually, but like clearly you don't think that highly of him because you're not willing to pay him to be your long-term primary ball handler. The Patrick Williams contract was obviously like nobody was coming close to that number. I look at that team and I guess I know what they're trying to be. They're trying to be fast and shoot a lot of threes, but I think they're doing that at just the lowest level of ambition possible. And if you're not even like trying to win at a high level, if you're just trying to be decent and make money, I can't rank you any higher than this. And the Pelicans are such a special case that like I assumed when I made the first rankings in February, the Bulls would kind of just be at number 30 until further notice. And under normal circumstances, that would be the case. It's just the Pelicans are so bad that they had to take the 30th slot.
Yeah, I think the Levine trade, that I'm not gonna knock him too hard on, because there was just no market for him, and I think him playing as well as he did just gave them the opportunity to finally just get off that contract, and they got a taker with the Kings, who we're gonna touch on next. But then it's trading, like when I did my net worth rankings, I keep forgetting what I called it. I had the Bulls last, and this was like 2 years ago when I last did it. And at that time, their most valuable player was arguably Alex Caruso, where
But arguably he
he,
was.
when you look at that roster, he was maybe the only guy who can get a first round pick at the time. Like this is like, like Levine after 1 year of his contract, DeRozan was no longer like on NBA level. Lonzo was injured. Vucevic fell off. That was why I had him in the bottom, where that was the only guy who had positive value. And then they reportedly turned down multiple first round pick type offers, or like high lottery type offers for him. Bring in Giddey, who I don't know if I just don't know what the vision is for bringing him in, other than that they think he's a nice player. He's not an easy guy to slot, and they don't have the pieces around him to make it successful. So
Yeah, they
yeah, it's
also
just
gotten a first round pick for Lonzo Ball from Memphis at the deadline. They could have done the Washington offer
yeah.
for Lonzo Ball. And like, by the way, I think I'd rather have Marcus Smart even at $20 million, so long as it's an expiring contract, than Isaac Okoro. So they not only lose out on a first round pick, they lose out on the better player.
Yeah, and that one's strange because the main difference is that Okoro, he's making 11 or 10 million, and then if they had done that trade, then they would have Marcus Smart making double that.
Yeah.
But the Bulls they have so much tax space right now. Even after they re-sign Giddy, like they're still gonna be well below it. And I don't think having Marcus Smart's larger expiring was really going to really cause any issues. So it's just confounding. Let's move on to the next two because I have some interesting thoughts on them. Where I think most people listening would agree. Yeah, the Kings and Suns are somewhere down here. I could see the Kings being higher, and this is just if we're looking at the front office and not ownership.
No, no,
Where
ownership counts.
yeah, okay. So I think one of the criteria you mentioned, which is very important, is alignment, the ability for a front office to convince ownership to go with a certain decision that they think is best. I don't I like what's this Scott Perry did with the Kings in his very brief time 8 years ago. So far, I kind of like what he's done. Other than the Valanciunas trade, but I don't know. I don't think that's too big a deal in the long grand scheme of things. I kind of like what he's done so far. If he can have a good level of influence on ownership, then why can't then maybe the Kings can be like not bottom tier. I think that we'll need time to see that. And I want to just touch on the Suns also really quickly, where again, like big difference between front office and organization. I mean, like ownership. Again, they go hand in hand. And if we're just ranking front offices, I'd actually think the Suns are much higher because they actually have a pretty good front office. Actually, I know some of the people there, like they do a lot of great work, but it's like, why are you investing so much in infrastructure and great people if ownership's just going to do what it wants in the end?
This is why you
So,
have to include ownership in the rankings.
so this is just why I like to make these distinctions where I, yeah, like because it's called the front office rankings, but yeah, they are organization rankings in its core. So just where I could give a little bit of a silver lining to the Suns and Kings, like their actual front offices, not, I wouldn't consider them bad by any means.
Are we sure we feel good about what the Kings are doing? Dennis Schroeder has played on 7 teams in the last 4 years. Do you really want to give him a 3-year deal? I certainly wouldn't. This whole
So
thing where they're desperate to get off of Devin Carter 1 year after they picked him in the lottery. Now, I know it's a different front office, and I'm not going to sit here and say I know who Devin Carter is going to be. I just want to point out the last time they traded a guard on a rookie contract, it didn't work out for them. That was Tyrese Halliburton. Oh, actually, no. I think did they trade Davion Mitchell first? So even that didn't work out well for them though, because Davion Mitchell was good, or at least was good for Miami last year. The Valanciunas trade, obviously, they could have gotten off of that for free, and instead they take on the Saric money. They did something else I didn't like. Oh, the Westbrook interest. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. And then, of course, obviously, we've talked about ownership. Vivek, they have made the playoffs once in 19 years. The reason they're ranked above the Bulls is that 1 year was pretty cool, right? The Beam team was fun. The Bulls have not had a Beam team of late. Other than that, just yeah, a team that's kind of directionless. I have no idea what they're trying to accomplish on the court. Why do you want Russell Westbrook if you have all of these other guards already? I know you're trying to move one of them, whether it's DeMar or Monk or Devin Carter or whoever, but like, what do you think is going to happen if you have 5 guards, all of whom at some point have either been like all NBA or MVP in Russ's case, or have averaged 18, 20 points a game, been a featured part of an offense, been a high draft pick? Like, those guys aren't going to suddenly be copacetic. No, they're just going to be fighting for the ball. So I really don't know what they're doing. Keon Ellis is the only guy on the team that defends. They messed up the Keon Ellis situation too when they picked up his team option instead of making him a restricted free agent and signing him for cheap. And now they're either going to have to overpay on an extension or lose him for nothing. So I just don't know what they're actually trying to do. The Suns, we can have a conversation about. I think there's something to that.
So I'll just close out the Kings where, okay, what are they trying to do? Uh, I would be curious to know what the front office wants to do with the core. Um, I think we're both in agreement that I don't think Levine and Sabonis making max level money is a recipe for success. And I get the feeling that the new front office probably understands that, but that's such a challenge to get off that money. Like if the Kings could right now, I feel like they would probably maybe they'd move Levine. I don't think there's a team out there because that would help them save a lot of money. Maybe that would help them with potentially getting Kaminga with the value. Maybe if they want to avoid trading a pick, if there's a team that wants Levine there. I will say the Kings did get a second round pick with Dennis Schroeder, so
Oh, that
I think
fixes
it's yeah,
everything.
it's a little more worth it. It makes a little more sense that they managed to get that. Help the Pistons create that trade exception. So I'm just more optimistic now. Again, it's based on very small sample size. I I think I think they might not be totally bottom tier. That's all I'm saying.
Talk about
Suns.
we got to talk about the Michigan State thing, how everybody in a key role in that organization either comes from the Michigan State tree or is Isaiah Thomas, who we don't know what level of influence he still has or had. I know there have been a lot of rumors that he's like whispering in Ishbia's ear. He's on the board of Ishbia's mortgage company. Isaiah Thomas, to those of you who are too young to remember, was like one of the, let's say, five worst general managers in NBA history, give or take. Also had a very embarrassing lawsuit with the Knicks. I'm more willing to consider the idea that there are smart people in this organization. You know some of them, I know some of them. There is creativity around here. I thought they did good work on draft night. I liked them getting Malawach. I personally am higher on Mark Williams than most. And I think that's the sort of high risk trade that they need to be making because they have such a big hole that they're trying to dig themselves out of. It's why I understand them pursuing Kaminga as well. They can't be hitting singles, right? If they hit singles, they go from like a 33 win team to a 36 win team. They need to be taking upside swings. To their credit, they are doing that. I still think waving and stretching Bradley Beal was really short sighted and insane and mostly about saving cash rather than actually making, a strong long-term basketball decision. I think in a few years that $20 million or so in dead money is really going to come back to haunt them, right? Like if you're trying to build a winner around Devin Booker that's sustainable, having all that dead money is not going to help you do that, right? So you'd better hope you get as much use as possible out of this short-term flexibility that you've created. I'm pretty dubious that they're going to be able to do that, but I at least give them points for trying. We'll see. Overall, I just think Ishbia has too much influence over everything this team does to really feel good about them moving forward. It's kind of funny. I can't remember when exactly he said this. I think it was right around when they fired Budenholzer. He basically said, like, I've tried being the hands off owner. Now I'm going to be way more hands on. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, when? When did you try that? Because you officially bought the team on February 7th, 2023, and the Kevin Durant trade was on February 9th. Are you just talking about February 8th, 2023, that one day? Because otherwise, he has been so heavily involved in everything that they've done, and he's so short sighted in the moves that he makes that he's dug this enormous hole for them. Like, if we're going to talk about moves that Ishbia has made or spearheaded, can we talk about like some of the secondary swaps they've offered on their draft picks, right? Like, think about when they make the Bradley Beal trade, they give swap rights in 2026 to Washington. That doesn't hurt you, right? Because you assume the Wizards are going to be bad. But then you give secondary swap rights on top of that to Orlando, and that becomes the crown jewel of the Desmond Bane trade. Like they gave up a really good asset to Orlando for 3 second-round picks, I think, and one of them was conditional. Like they're just really short sighted. They're just like they spend money, they spend assets the moment they get it. I'm really nervous they're going to trade their 2033 first round pick the moment they can. Trading their 2031 first round pick, they got 15 cents on the dollar. That was a terrible trade. So I'm sorry to the people in that organization that I know, because there are smart people there, and Ishbia, to his credit, willing to spend money not just on the roster but behind the scenes as well. It's just that he has been so involved in their decisions, and those decisions have gone so badly.
If there's a whole separate ranking we could do, which is best and worst outlook, and I think it's if we're doing that, the Suns would probably be at the very bottom, just based on how leveraged they are. Um, if I was doing my net value thing again, they have no picks really. They have like no tradable picks. They only have like 2 seconds to trade, I think. Um, they don't have much, and then in terms of their player value, like they have some nice, interesting young players. I don't think they have a ton of value. And then if you look at who has the most value on their team, like in a trade, I suppose it's Booker, but
What do you
I
think
don't
his value
think.
is now?
Well, that's it. That's what I'm about to get to. I don't think that extension raises trade value. I'm kind of curious if maybe it hurt it. We're both pretty critical about that extension, how early that was. They weren't really getting ahead of anything. It just feels like that extension was the result of their mistakes. Where, hey, if we're gonna keep this guy on board after everything that just happened these past 2 years, we're gonna have to just offer this extension, and that's what it feels like to me. So, um, yeah, not a great situation. Dallas.
Uh,
And anything you wanted to touch? Anything else you wanted to add?
to the Phoenix thing, I would just yeah, I think Devin Booker's value right now is like it's less than the Donovan Mitchell trade was, right? You're not getting three unprotected firsts, a swap, and like a good young player like Markkinen was, and they got two because Sexton was good as well. Like, no, it's lower than that. It's
Let
I
me
think
let me let me shoot you a fake trade
okay.
from the Knicks at SBC. The Knicks team, they traded for Booker. They traded. Let me get the trade out. They traded OG, Mitchell Robinson, McBride, and Dadier. No picks for Booker. What do you
That
think of
trade
that?
makes them worse. How are
Who?
they going to
The
stop
Knicks?
the Knicks?
No, no,
Yeah, how are they going to stop?
no, no. I'm with you on that. I'm just saying, like, what do you
Yeah.
think of that as value for the Suns, considering that contract he has?
I don't think that's great value. Like a few years ago, when you could have traded OG for like four picks, maybe then it would have been justifiable. But now with OG on that big contract, and like OG isn't valuable to a Suns team without Booker, right? Like OG is valuable to a team with two stars that can like really benefit from his defense. So that's not a good trade for the Suns either. I don't know what the idea to that was, but I guess
It's
that was
just,
just today.
yeah, no, it's just interesting because that trade was it brought out a lot of discussion within the judges, and that is something where I'm not saying I would see the Knicks doing that, but what that package was, I could see that being maybe the best the Suns could potentially get for Booker down the line,
Yeah,
assuming he holds it up.
I just don't really get what Phoenix like. You're building a team around OG and Obi, like
I'm just saying the value. He doesn't
right?
need to come to them. It just seems like
Yeah,
that's where I
I
could
guess
see
two
like
good players,
a good,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah,
So Dallas, my thoughts on them is I think you kind of do you kind of you can't you have to separate the Lucas stuff a little bit, but you also can't.
no, you
Um, I think because if you take that away, I think they've been like maybe not average, maybe slightly below average. And the Luca trade, when you put that in, I think a lot of people would agree that they are bottom tier now because that's how big of a mistake that is. And there's a possibility that they're right about Luca, where maybe he does break down a little early. But even so, that return wasn't enough. I think they've been pretty aggressive before trading Luca, building a team around him, like trading a pick for Kyrie, trading a pick for Gafford, trading a pick for PJ, and they've all worked. but they are now in this position where they need to be good in the later years because none of those picks have conveyed yet. And after that Luka trade, that wasn't looking like a good outlook. And then they lucked into Cooper Flag, where now they should tread well enough for maybe not all, maybe most of those picks are just low picks, or at least not anything super valuable. So it's tough because in some ways I do think you got to separate the Lucas stuff a little bit to like really like evaluate because they've done some good stuff.
Okay.
So that's why so I'll just say that like I think yeah they should probably be at the top of this tier, which we're
Well, they
at
are
the
at
end
the
of.
top of this tier, so there we
Yeah.
go. But you don't get points for luck, and we'll get into the Cooper Flag stuff later. That was an all-time fluke. When Nico said fortune favors the bold, I have no horse in this race. I don't live in Dallas, but like that, I think that was the maddest I've been at a general manager in a long time. It's like, no, you just made a mistake. It wasn't a mistake though. It was three mistakes baked into a single trade. The first mistake was you don't trade Luka Doncic, right? Like, period. You have a guy that good who wants to be on your team. You just keep him. That's mistake number one. Okay, let's say you've decided for whatever reason you do have to trade him. Mistake number two is trading him to the Lakers, right? Number one, they don't have much to offer. You could have gotten so much more by going to so many other teams. You also now have to play against the Lakers, by the way. And you know what the rest of the league does not want to help the Lakers do is get superstars because they've done a pretty good job of doing that on their own for the better part of 60, 70 years now. So congratulations. You now have to face the Lakers with Luka and whoever Luka ends up recruiting. That in itself really hurts your championship equity. You didn't hold a bidding war. You could have gotten so much more. Fine. Let's imagine a world in which, for whatever reason, you have to trade Luka Doncic to the Lakers. You didn't get Austin Reeves. How? You got one first round pick. You didn't get two. You didn't like, there were so many ways you could have made that a more palatable trade with the Lakers, and you didn't do it. That's the thing. It's not just the mistake of, oh, they traded Luka Doncic, so they're perpetually at the bottom of these lists. They traded Luka Doncic in the worst imaginable possible way. So let's look at where they are now, right? They get Cooper Flag. That's a golden opportunity for you to change course, for you to fire Nico Harrison, who should not have that job after making the Luka trade. I think most owners, if their GM came to them and said, "Hey, I want to trade Luka," you tell the GM no, and if he persists, you fire him. But let's say he's there and he wants to play out
Yeah,
his vision.
that's exactly what Mark Cuban I said he would have done. Exactly what
Exactly.
you just said.
Right. And
In
you know
that
what?
process.
Mark Cuban was an NBA owner for 20 years, and the Mavericks were good for basically all of them. They won a championship. I might trust Mark Cuban on how to build an NBA team. So here's where they are now. They have Cooper Flag, and they have this golden opportunity where they could trade Anthony Davis right now for a pretty substantial package of picks back. They could trade Gafford for value. They could trade Washington for value. They could trade most of the veterans on that team for a reasonable amount of value and set yourself up to actually build something sustainable around Cooper Flag. You have one more year with Kyrie having a torn ACL and with control of your 2026 pick where you can tank and try to get Cooper a running mate, right? Then you get other picks by trading those veterans. You could just do this the normal way. You have an incoming star and you build around him. What's going to happen here is they're going to keep Davis. They're going to keep those veterans. They obviously re-signed Kyrie. They're going to go for it for the next year or two. It's going to go badly because that team is not good enough. It is not balanced. It doesn't have enough shooting. It doesn't have enough offense, whatever. Like, it's the seventh or eighth best team in the Western Conference. What's going to happen is in 1 or 2 years, they're going to look around. Davis and Kyrie are going to be out of their star phase. They're going to be too old and or injured. And you're going to have no picks to build around Cooper Flag with, right? They have a chance to fix this. It's in front of them right now, and they're not taking it. And they're not taking it because Nico Harrison is dead set on this ridiculous defense wins championship vision. And by the way, I'm not convinced their defense is that good. Let's talk about that, right? They have all of these bigs. They have so much size. Fine. Being big on defense, that is valuable. Who's defending at the point of attack? Is their best point of attack defender Max Christie? Like, who is their best defensive guard right now? Because when they made it to the finals, I would argue, like, defensively, the biggest factor was Derek Lively, who was incredible. The second was Derek Jones Jr., who defended Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in the second round, was incredible, was very good defensively, and Anthony Edwards in the Western Conference Finals as well. You don't have somebody like that. You don't have somebody to throw at the top guards in the West when you inevitably face them in the playoff. And by the way, when you face them in the playoffs, it will be as a lower seed because the injury prone player that you built around surprisingly got hurt and is going to miss most of this season. So it's not just trading Luka, it's the manner in which they traded him, it's the way they followed it up. We haven't talked about Quentin Grimes yet, which is an insane trade. I just have no faith in Nico Harrison as a person to build an NBA team around. I think he has an insane vision of what wins in the NBA. And what's more than that, I think he has an insane vision of like what fans will support. And at the core of this, what this enterprise actually means. Dallas had Dirk for 20 years. He is a revered figure in that community. Teams go decades without having guys like that. When you have one on your team, that's bigger than basketball. That's about having somebody your entire city can rally around. To give that up for what he did, that's a fireable offense in itself. There's like almost nothing that he could do that would rise him up the rankings. Like what I think is just going to happen is he's going to hold that job for another year or two and get fired. And that'll be that.
Yeah, I've got nothing else to add to that. Should we move on to the next tier? I think the next four actually, they kind of make sense as a tier together. 25th, you got the Raptors. 24, you got the Bucks. 23, you got the Blazers. 22, you got the Lakers. The one thing I kind of feel in common with this group, not a lot of winning on the margins, not a lot of like small victories. And the way you just went in on the Mavs, I kind of want to go in on the Raptors because I think they might be the ultimate test case for how long does your championship aura truly last? Where if you win a championship and then you just decided you're going to make a lot of poor decisions and see how long the that championship glow still rings and how much like leeway you get as far as how the rest of the league and media perceives you as a front office. I feel like this Raptors team kind of like this Raptors these past 5-6 years kind of proved it, because as soon as Kawhi left, you could make a case. Okay, they had to run it back. They had to do it. They just won the championship, even though they lost Kawhi. We've never seen a player walk away from a championship like after winning a championship. And you can make a case that most of the stuff they did ever since has just been like this spiral where they've kept some guys for way too long. Whether that's Marc Gasol, maybe they should have traded him. Serge Ibaka, same thing, instead of losing them for nothing. It's smaller stuff they would have gotten just like a couple seconds. The biggest one was Fred VanVleet. And then you can also argue potentially also OG and Siakam. Maybe they probably could have gotten a lot more for them had they moved on from them earlier. Not really any good signings with their mid-level or the biannual that like, I remember as soon as Kawhi left, they like went out and got Stanley Johnson. It's like, what are we doing? It's just that with the Raptors, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Like, you could make a case that if not for the selection of Scotty Barnes, that not only might they be in this bottom tier, they might arguably be like one of the bottom two, like even, or maybe even like one of the worst run teams decision wise of the past 5-6 years. Like the moment Kawhi left, if it wasn't for the Scotty Barnes selection, like what would they be looking towards to like show, hey, look what we've done?
Even the Scotty Barnes, like it was the right pick, and it was an unconventional pick at the time. Jalen Suggs was considered the better prospect by most at that point. I don't think Scotty Barnes is like a guy you build your team around. You asked a philosophical question that I think I can answer, which is how long does that championship sheen last? And I think in their case, it lasted until the last guys from that team were gone, right? Where we had all of this initial faith in Masai Ujiri in the years leading up to, or the years following the championship, rather. We're like, remember in 2020 and 2021, before Giannis signed the first Bucks extension, we talked about the Raptors as like a team that could legitimately get Giannis because we had that much faith in Masai Ujiri because most of that championship team was still intact. And it was like, oh, they preserved the cap space. They'll be able to slide him into it. And then as the years progressed and they kept losing guys from that team and they kept making questionable decisions, we kind of kept going like, oh, well, we don't know what the plan is, but we trust
We trust them.
Masai.
Yeah.
And then losing Van Vliet for me was the moment where I'm like, okay, this is a serious red flag because you could have traded him for serious value at the deadline preceding his free agency. That's when my antenna went
Yeah.
up.
The
And then
the
OG,
and that, sorry to interrupt, like not trading Van Vliet paired with the trade of trading for Jakob Poeltl, the double down.
well, you bring that up, like they traded, I think, more value to get Jakob Poeltl than they got for OG Anunoby, right? Would you rather have the number 8 pick in an admittedly weak draft or Emmanuel Quickly and an RJ Barrett contract that now I think they're trying to get off of? And by the way, Quickly they overpaid. He's like pretty commonly viewed as one of the worst contracts in the NBA now. They gave up a number 8 pick for Jakob Poeltl, who's substantially worse than OG Anunoby. The Siakam trade too, I don't know that there was like a better offer out there. With OG, they could have just gotten 3 or 4 unprotected picks at a certain point, right? With Siakam, I don't know that was ever quite on the table. But then the trade they made, they get 3 like bad first round picks, essentially. So that was the moment once Siakam and OG were gone where I'm just like, I have no idea what this team is actually trying to do. Yossi, they're a luxury tax team. How? For the talent that's on that roster, how are they paying the tax?
I mean, they'll get out of it. It's that Ingram extension. I mean, everyone's making a lot of money there. That whole starting lineup, they're all well paid.
And there's not an all-star caliber player in that group. Everybody is
Yeah.
overpaid. All of their starters are overpaid.
Yeah, it's upsetting to me because Masai's my hero. He's the reason I wanted to become an armchair GM. Um, but
Some
yeah,
guys have it until they don't. Like we'll see. Masai is a
yeah.
guy we're going to talk about this in a little bit with another team. I think a good way to think about GMs is if they became available, how eager would another team be to hire them? And Masai is now available. I think Masai will get hired as a GM again. I'm not really worried about that. There are some other GMs in this tier where they have had ostensibly success. And by the way, 3 of the 4 teams in this tier have won a championship recently, right? The Raptors did in 2019, the Bucks did in 2021, and the Lakers did in 2020. Like you can do that without being a great organization if certain other things break right for you. I don't think, say, if Rob Pelinka became a free agent, some other team would be eager to hire him as a GM. But anyway, that covers the Raptors. Let's get to the Bucks.
I'll quickly touch on what you just said about the Lakers. I think it's worth just discussing because there was some remarks today by Daryl Morey about the Lakers 2020 championship, and that's back then I was there. I was like, yeah, I don't really think this championship is that great, and I've kind of grown into it. Now I do think in some ways it is more impressive. But at the same time, yeah, there are some great points. Like, okay, well, maybe it did help the Lakers, maybe it hurt other teams, but I still think that it was like I'm a little more impressed by that championship now. Um, the, so with them, yeah, maybe there was some luck with the environment, with everything that happened for them to get into that situation with the bubble. The Bucks now, I think, I'm where a lot of people want to look at the bubble championship and put down the
Are
Lakers.
we gonna do this?
I'm kind of more in that mindset about the following season, that 2020-2021 season, where there was no, I mean, yeah, you just had a long break because of COVID, but then after the bubble into the start of the season, it was kind of rushed. We saw the result. There was like 5 or 6 huge ACL tears, like massive injuries that like happened in the playoffs or like in the lead up to it, and a lot of players just were not available. A lot of like key players missed 21, 22, and both the Suns and Bucks had a lot of injuries along their way. Anyways, the whole point is I do think the Bucks have been the beneficiary of a lot of luck in the past, not just that championship run, a lot of just a lot of other things. Even that Damian Lillard trade, while that's backfired on them, I think back then most people liked the value they gave up, and you can say they got pretty lucky that that situation kind of got botched and it kind of fell into the Bucks' lap. It just didn't work out, and the pair with Giannis wasn't as good as people thought it should have been, and then he got hurt.
All right, the
Um,
2021 Bucks conversation. I think at least with the Lakers, the year they won in the bubble, they were like one of the best teams all year. They were 49-14 when the season stopped, +7 net rating. They were the number one seed in the West. They were like a standard championship level team. Personally, I don't think the Bucks were one of the 4 best teams that year. I think they were the 5th best team, and I think the Suns were the 6th best team. I think the 4 best teams in some order were the Nets, who would have beaten them if either Kyrie or Harden had been healthy in that series. Like just one. You needed 2 of your 3 stars. They had one of their 3 stars at the end. Number 2, number 3, and the floor, number 4 in some order were the Lakers, who were killed by injuries, and their locker room, to be fair, kind of got destroyed with the Andre Drummond thing and the Marcus All drama. The Clippers, who lost Kawhi Leonard in the second round, and the Nuggets, who lost Jamal Murray to the torn ACL. Like, I think the Bucks were the 5th best team that year, and they won a championship because the top 4 teams imploded due to injury. Injuries happen, but I don't remember another year where I think the 4 best teams were all done in by injuries. And it feels notable to me that 2 of those 4 teams were teams that played deep into the previous playoffs in the bubble. And then the other 2 teams were teams that like had injury prone guys, but like the stars really had to align for them to end up in the injury place that they did. As far as the front office for the Bucks goes, they never draft well. Like, what young talent have they developed
so
under?
okay, so that's literally what I'm looking at right
Yeah,
now. They're they're the best selection they've made, probably like I would consider a good selection in the first round in like recent history was Dante DiVincenzo in 2018, and
mm-hmm.
that selection kind of took a while. He had some injuries, and then they decided not to bring him back, and now he's the Bucks really use him right now. Yeah, there's just no that's why I brought up the comment. Like a lot of these teams we're about to talk about, they never win on the margins. The Bucks, they don't get like select the single player that can be in their rotation. All the guys they bring in, they kind of churn in and out. Their best rotation players are generally veterans from other teams. Just not like really no developmental stories in the past decade.
Exactly. Like the one like really thing, the one homegrown guy you can really point to, well, there are 2, Giannis and Chris Middleton, neither of whom were acquired by this front office, and that was like a decade plus ago. So hard to really hang your hat on that if you're the Bucks. And then you look at like the ways they've been successful in recent years, it's throwing all of their picks, all of their assets, all of their cap flexibility at one big name and kind of just kicking the can down the road, right? The Jrue Holiday trade was a good trade. I have no objections to it, even if I don't think they were one of the 4 best teams that year. They did win a championship, and I think Jrue Holiday was worth that price. The Damian Lillard trade, I don't necessarily have a question with the trade at the time. I do have questions about like the plan to follow it up. I think the Adrian Griffin hire has proven to be a disaster, and the Doc Rivers hire has not gone especially well either. I just have questions about how they plan to build that team. Getting Damian Lillard in itself, a reasonable thing to do, but Damian Lillard was very explicitly a win now player. He was a veteran in his 30s. You had to have a better plan for like, how are we going to play proper defense with him on our team than, oh, we're going to ask Malik Beasley to guard the best guy on other teams. Like, that's just not an acceptable plan. They had to do better than that. The Miles Turner thing we've talked about in a lot of depth. Very, very irresponsible for a very limited amount of gain, where they have effectively replaced Brooke Lopez, but now not only will have this dead money on their books, but they have nobody to replace the offense that Lillard brought them. So I think we both look at the Bucks as like a 500 or so team right now. If you're going to over leverage yourself this much, where you're out all of your picks and you've given up this dead money, you have all of this cap flexibility tied up in a player that will not play for you for the next 5 years, you have to be better than this, and they're not. And the last thing I'm going to say is ownership does matter. I don't know how many fans think about this, but the Bucks have one of the weirdest ownership structures in the entire NBA. The way that it works is when this group bought the team, I think it was like 2013, something like that. You'd have to go back and check the year. The way it worked was instead of having one governor, they have two governors who alternate the governorship every 5 years. This has created a lot of really weird situations where one owner has wanted to do something, but the other owner, who happened to be the governor at the time, didn't. And that has messed with the ways in which they've operated. So the really notable one was when John Horst got hired as the GM, he was not the initial plan. The person they planned to hire was Justin Zanuck, who's now the GM of the Jazz. He had come to Milwaukee. As I understand it, two of the three owners were on board with Zanuck, but the one who had the controlling interest at the time, or the one who was nominally the governor at that time, didn't want Zanuck. So there was like back and forth and back and forth. And finally, they land on Horst as the compromise candidate. It is really not good to have an unclear hierarchy at the ownership level. That is something that I did factor in with the Bucks, especially when one of those alternate governors now, who I believe starting in 2028 will take over his 5-year term as governor, is Jimmy Haslam, who owns the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. And the Cleveland Browns have not exactly been a functional NFL organization for basically ever. So if you're owned by the guy who owns the Cleveland Browns, I don't feel great about that. So that is where I land on the Bucks as number 24.
And then obviously we'll see what happens with Giannis. I think if they can get a really nice, if that comes to, if he finally asks for a trade, I'll be very interested in seeing what ownership prioritizes in a return. That will be that'll be very huge in my eyes. Portland, I think with them, the process hasn't been clear or smooth, but ultimately it kind of worked out for them. For example, the Damian Lillard trade, the way that went down was a mess. The return, it was like a bunch of stuff, just a bunch of contracts, not too many picks. But then they parlayed some of that into Deni Avdija. Directly, the best part of that return was Tamani Kamara. They in the end they kind of figure out a way to get what they want and target who they want. Whether all those players are hits, we'll see. But I've kind of come around on them, where I'm still like what we discussed with the Blazers last time. I think they might be the most unpredictable team now. I'm done trying to predict what they're gonna do, because this offseason, between the draft, trades they've done, free agency, I didn't see any of that coming. Even buying out DeAndre Ayton, like, okay, I could have seen an Ayton buyout happening, just not this early, but it happened. The process may not be sound, but so far, I think it's been fine. The results been fine, and it's still early. We'll see. But I think, yeah, I feel like they might be appropriately tiered, with like optimism that they might stealthily be a lot higher than this.
The Blazers are interesting to me. We've talked about the last few teams, and the one we have coming up don't really win on the margins. The Blazers are kind of the opposite, where I actually do think they've had wins on the margins, Tamani Kamara being the biggest. The bigger question is bigger picture, right? Joe Cronin took over in December of 2021. That's 3.5 years. They do not have a player on this team that we look at right now as having obvious all-star potential, right? The big picture plan almost always has to revolve around having a player or two players or three players on your team that you think can consistently make all-star teams or all NBA teams. They do not have that player right now. They are presumably not going to be bad enough to draft that player in the next few years. So you really have to hope that maybe it's Scoot Henderson or Shaden Sharp, or like, I don't think it's likely, but Yang Hansoon, like maybe one of those guys really breaks out and becomes your like franchise player. It's hard for me to give a front office too much credit for a rebuild when that rebuild has not yet yielded like a firmly cornerstone player that you can build around. I think they've done a very good job of getting supporting players for a star that is not yet there. And I do look at the Damian Lillard trade and these very, very valuable Milwaukee picks they've gotten as a potential path to that star. But even that, several years away. And I just like, if we're going to go another 2, 3 years and Cronin is going to be 5, 6, 7 years on the job without having found that franchise player, I just don't know how I can rank them any higher than this. I wanted them one spot above Milwaukee because they did win the Bucks, that Damian Lillard trade with the Bucks. So it felt appropriate to me that they were ranked above them. I still can't put them any higher than this, especially given the contracts that they've given out. The Jeremy Grant contract was incomprehensible the moment they did it. The Drew Holiday trade with the contract attached was really, really bizarre. The Damian Lillard contract was fine in a vacuum. You're just committing so much money to older players that are going to make it harder for you to acquire whoever your next franchise player is, because that cap flexibility, like you're not going to sign a star in Portland, but you can use it to get picks, you can get it to get supporting players. There are all sorts of ways you can use cap space. I just, all things considered, given just the kind of low ambition bar they've set thus far, they kind of had to be in the bottom 10.
My biggest criticism is the contract management. You mentioned Jeremy Grant's contract. They also bringing in DeAndre Ayton's contract. They brought in Malcolm. I mean, they had to bring in some money, but they didn't have to bring in as much money as they did. I think they felt that instead of having any cap flexibility, let's just bring in these guys. Maybe we could flip them later. And for the most part, they haven't been able to flip anybody for positive value on these big contracts, either through the ones they signed or brought in as part of a bigger trade. I think they probably could have accumulated more draft picks had they had a little more tax space, been able to do some salary dumps. That's probably my biggest issue with them, more than some of the other bigger picture stuff. Lakers. I mean, we already mentioned about with them. I would say my biggest issue with them, I think, reactivity. A lot of how their off seasons go. It, for the most part, they can be pretty busy, like a lot of moves. And I think a lot of it is kind of reacting to how a player did and how that could fit a certain need. And I think the 2020 offseason is one of the bigger like examples that get overlooked. People look at the 2021 because the Westbrook trade and all those signing all those older vets, but like in 2020 you had this winning formula, and then you go out and trade for Dennis Schroeder. I think, because you needed a guard, and I feel like the Gabe Vincent, like the decision to bring him in, kind of comes from that same decision-making family of that Schroeder trade. Like they'll bring in guys that, and I think this year it's kind of the opposite, where they're bringing in guys based on stuff they did like 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like they might do moves to make moves, and they had a lot of good stuff going up for them, and then they just change it.
They remake the team every year or two, right? If you ever look at their roster in a given day and then you check the roster to that day 2 years earlier, like 60% of the players are different. And that's just been consistently true since they got LeBron and AD. The one time Rob Pelinka has ever really valued or like built around 3 and D players was in 2020, or rather the offseason 2019, when he did it by accident because they tried to sign Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi strung them along for a week. He signs with the Clippers, and they kind of just have to sign whoever's left. Now, I think Rob Pelinka was in touch with those players before. I think he was kind of aware, like, this is the backup plan. Let's not pretend, though, that like he had this plan from the start of LeBron and AD and all these 3 and D wings, and it came together great. The moment he like started actively building the roster, gone were the 3 and D players, in were the points per game players, right? If you look at the way that the Lakers acquire players, the best trait, the best stat for them is almost always like, wow, they score a lot of points. It's Montrezl Harrell, it's Russell Westbrook, it's Kendrick Nunn, it's Rui Hachimura, it's Christian Wood. The Lakers have, like, they're very much known for their star obsession. The Lakers have this really serious talent obsession where they're just thinking, how do we get the guy with the big name? How do we get the guy that people have heard of? How do we get the guy who was drafted really highly? I think getting second draft players can be a very smart strategy if you do it intelligently. Indiana does it really, really well, where they very intentionally target high draft picks on good teams who can't find minutes. That's how you wind up with Obi Toppin. That's how you wind up with Aaron Nesmith. The Lakers kind of do it differently, where they target high draft picks who have flamed out with multiple teams in the past because they didn't play well. Not that they barely played, but because they didn't play well. Cam Reddish, Jackson Hayes. They've had several guys of that ilk where it's just like, yeah, we're taking a chance on the guy who was the high draft pick, and we're gonna just think we think we can fix him. And like, it worked out for Rui Hachimura. It hasn't really worked out for anyone else. Even when they do get it right, Malik Monk is an example that I point to. They hit a home run with Malik Monk. They also signed him for a 1 year minimum that they gave them no room to actually keep him. So you have this value, this surplus value for a year, and then he goes to the Kings and he's gone. The Lakers do this a lot where they really seek out guys who have high upside as surplus value guys. This offseason, the two of them are DeAndre Ayton and Marcus Smart, but they never actually build in a way to keep those guys long term. Because if Marcus Smart or DeAndre Ayton are good, they're going to opt out of their 1+1s and get more money from another team this offseason. If they're bad, they're just going to stay on their books and clog the books for next year, which, by the way, the Lakers do a lot. No team gives out more player options than the Lakers. Christian Wood, Jackson Hayes, all of
Bucks
those
gave
guys.
out a little more this year.
Did they give out more this year?
Oh, the Bucks gave
Oh, the
out
Bucks did,
to
yeah.
this year they gave
Another
out
thing
more.
you know,
So
to criticize the Bucks for too many player options, but
yeah,
that's an overriding sense of where I think the Lakers go wrong a lot. There's also the like palace intrigue where a lot of the time we don't know who's making decisions. Is it Rob Pelinka? Is it Kurt Rambis? Is it Linda Rambis? Is it Tim Harris? Phil Jackson has sometimes reportedly been a voice in Genie's ear. Magic Johnson too. It's kind of ironic that there are all of these great executives who have come through Los Angeles, whether it was Pat Riley or Jerry West, and those are the guys that the Lakers drove away. But the ones who aren't very good, like Phil and like Magic, are the ones who are kind of still hanging around on the periphery. I think when Mark Walter firmly gains control of the team, he will fix a lot of this. And I think there will be a much clearer hierarchy. Maybe there will be a new GM, maybe there won't be, but they'll spend a lot more on infrastructure, on health, on scouting, etc., on analytics. And the Lakers will probably be a much better front office at that point. But they're not there now, so they're ranked at number 22. I will give credit where it's due for one thing, which is scouting. The Lakers are very, very good at finding players in the draft, whether it's Josh Hart and Kyle Kuzma at the back of one first round, Ivica Zubac in the second round, Alex Caruso, Austin Reeves, Scottie Pippen Jr., Jay Huff. There have been a lot of them. Their problem is they keep finding these guys and they keep letting them go. So even when you discover these untapped gems or these diamonds in the rough, it doesn't really mean much if you can't lock them up. Like right now, Jay Huff and Scottie Pippen Jr. both would be pretty valuable for where the Lakers are. They're both on long-term minimum deals. and the Lakers aren't benefiting from that. It's the Grizzlies and the Pacers. So that's kind of my biggest issue with the Lakers. Well, biggest issues. I think they have a chance to be a lot better in the near future. But for right now, I kind of just don't really agree with most of the things that they do.
Okay, so I have an idea because now I'm looking at the rest of the teams, and while we definitely have our opinions, biases on the ones we discussed 8 of them. Would you say that between 21 and up, that any of these are like a bad front office? I feel like everyone going forward is like pretty neutral at worst.
I'm so glad you brought this up. There's a very important distinction here. So I'm just going to read off teams 16 to 21. There's a theme here. The Atlanta Hawks 16, the Brooklyn Nets 17, the Washington Wizards at 18, the Detroit Pistons 19, Charlotte Hornets 20, Denver Nuggets 21. The Nets are a separate thing we can talk about. All of those other teams are front offices that are like still very new to the job, right? Like they're front offices that just got hired and have short track records, but I broadly think they're operating in the right direction. You can't rank them super high because we have to see how this plays out, but I think they're broadly being smart in the way that they're run. They're ranked here because the 8 teams we've discussed are teams where I just disagree with their vision. So starting at number 21 and going up, you're right. These are teams that I would consider well run.
So I would say then, if we're looking at these teams now, let's try to kind of think about more of the positives, because now we're trying to rank on not so much the mistakes, but like the things that help put these teams like another level higher. Ceiling raising, I suppose, if that makes sense. Um, and the Nuggets being down here is interesting because I do have concerns that the direction was kind of Bucks esque where it was going. Um, and but they have a lot more upside. They have a much better role supporting cast around Jokic before this offseason. And now they completely redid their payroll structure where you can make you I think the Nuggets have a much better case than the Bucks to do what they did, trade one of their last picks, uh, reset the payroll a bit to extend this window with Jokic than what the Bucks just did to try to extend whatever they have going on with Giannis. Um, I think with this front office, yeah, it's early, but it's very much part of the old front office. It's like mostly promotions, I think, to in the leadership now. And I think, and it seems like ownership has always been pretty involved. So, yeah, I think this is kind of appropriate placing them because there is some concerns about like, how much do they want to spend on stuff. Um, but overall, I could see them being much higher. You already moved them up. You moved them up 3 spots. Not too much, but it's something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big problem with the last regime was Calvin Booth and the just chaos that followed him and Michael Malone, how toxic their relationship was, how it permeated throughout the entire organization. I think this was a very good start. I think Cam Johnson is a better player than Michael Porter Jr. So the savings on top of that are kind of the cherry, right? Where that gets you Valanciunas and it helps you duck the tax and it sets you up to build something a little bit more sustainable. I am optimistic about what they're doing now. I do ding them in part because the Cronkies are not known for being, let's say, super spendy, right? Like getting below the tax makes basketball sense. It also saves a lot of money, and that's an ownership group that I don't know deserves the benefit of the doubt when they don't have a practice facility, right? They practice in their arena. I believe they were one of the last teams to have a G League team, right? Before they were really good, before they had Jokic, they were not known as a team that spent a lot of money. So I do ding them a little bit for that. And I ding them a little bit for letting the Malone Booth stuff fester as it did. But I'm optimistic about where the current group is. And if they have a very good season where they like make the finals or make the Western Conference finals based on the moves that they just made, yeah, I'll probably push them up the list. I just also think it's worth noting the person who built their team truly is running the Minnesota Timberwolves right now. So Tim Connolly gets all of the credit for drafting Jokic, for trading for Gordon, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll talk about Tim Connolly at a much higher spot on this list. So I just can't give them too much credit because they worked the margins and they worked them very well. But one off season of working the margins is not going to get you ranked much higher than this.
I think we can get through teams 18 and 20 pretty quickly. Charlotte and Washington, who are in
19 as
rebuild.
well. We could just race through them. Like, good start, guys.
Yeah. I mean, 18 and 20, Wizards and Hornets in particular. I think, especially the Hornets, it took them it took both these teams like a good amount of time to start getting into the direction that they are in, which they should be. And I think the Hornets are just quietly accumulating a lot of value ever since that last year's trade deadline, getting what they did for PJ Washington, Terry Rozier, as you mentioned in it. They got a lot of value for Mark Williams. Just
Not
they've
their
done
fault.
really well there. The Wizards just like also just really nice salary cap management. They're like rolling over trade exceptions, creating more ways to take on more money, racking up second round picks, then slowly getting a nice first round pick distribution over the years. Just nice job by them. Pistons. Yeah, I mean, do you have anything you want to add to them, or you just want to skip through them?
No, I think that this is all pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah,
The Wizards and the Hornets are doing the same thing. They're accumulating picks, they're managing their money well. They
yeah,
haven't like built their teams yet, but they're doing the right things given the circumstances that they're in. The Pistons, like, I mean, I don't want to give too much credit to Troy Weaver because he did so many things wrong. At least he did draft well, where he drafted Cade, he drafted Duran, he drafted Asar Thompson, drafted Jaden Ivey. Like, the core was drafted, and all Trajan Langdon has done so far is fill in with veteran role players. I think he's mostly gotten the right veteran role players. I think he managed this offseason pretty well, given the curveball of the Malik Beasley situation getting thrown at him at the last minute. They are a team that, like, they just made the playoffs. They'll presumably be in the mix again next year, but we won't really judge Trajan Langdon until he makes whatever his big move is going to be, right? And we don't know what that's going to be. Maybe they trade a bunch of picks for a star, or like maybe
yeah.
they, do something with Jaden Ivey, or like they're going to make a big move at some point next year or two. That's going to give us much more of an idea of like what Trajan Langdon specifically wants to build, because so far now he's only really worked on the
Yeah.
margin, but I've liked what he's done on the margins.
I think you hit it perfectly. It's still, even though he's been there for a year now, a lot of it is just like figuring out what to do with the pieces left behind, and he's done an incredible job there. Not too much as far as like what are the original picks, what are the original moves you're doing, which I think kind of like in a way doesn't like change Troy Weaver's legacy, but like he actually didn't draft horribly. It's just that a lot of the way they try to put everything together did not work. Um, the Nets, I think this is a very interesting discussion because you had them drop 5 spots since February. And in my mind, I think I had them probably like top 5 a couple of years ago. And I think they might still be higher in my mind than some of these teams above them. But I think the thing now that's getting in the public's eye them to be more down on the Nets is I think you and I could agree that they've done an excellent job accumulating value. They got a generational haul for Kevin Durant. I think while the Mavericks certainly won the Kyrie Irving trade, just given everything going on with Kyrie at the time when they did the trade, I think that's fine value. And then obviously what they got for Mikal Bridges, ton of value. I think the big issue now is like the realization of the value, where in this draft they couldn't trade up, and instead of maybe rolling over picks, or we look, we don't know what was discussed, what they had on the table. They bet on their scouting, they bet on their process, and took a selection on everybody, and that was a very polarizing decision, certainly, especially among the fan base. We'll see if I think the best reasonable scenario or maybe reasonably better. Best case scenario is that two of these selections hit. If they do, I think that's a fine outcome. And when you look at the Nets last decade when they were coming out of that hole from that Celtics trade, they didn't have any high draft picks. They hit on a bunch of value ones. The guys in the middle of the draft or late end of the draft, end of the first round. Guys like Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, they were killing it on the margins. And even though that's not the plan is to get the highest draft pick possible and hit on those. I think they're also trying. They're kind of betting on that kind of result as well, and it's kind of weird to mix like winning, so trying to get a lot of marginal wins while also like you need to win the big ones right now because they don't have any, like they have a ton of picks, they have a ton of stuff, they just don't have like a super valuable player right now, or a super someone who a lot of people project to be, like an all-star at least.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they came one Kevin Durant shoe size away from probably winning one championship, and then the ripple effects, who knows, like maybe they even win a second. Maybe you keep the team together at that point, and like Harden doesn't force his way out. You do have to give them credit for building that first great team. And like you said, drafting Jared Allen, drafting Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie on the margins, Joe Harris on the margins. Nick Claxton was, I believe, an early second round pick. I'd have to go back and check. Good pick there. They've done a lot of things really well, yet they were a team. I think they were probably one of the few teams that I got the most pushback on my ranking. People really don't like their last couple of off seasons. Now, some of that I think you can debate, right? Like we both really love the Cam Johnson trade for them. Not everybody did. People didn't think they got enough. I think that's crazy. I think that unprotected 2020 or 2032 Denver pick is super valuable. Drafting 5 rookies doesn't bother me. I think if you're drafting Demon, you got to move down a few slots to do it. I also think they would have been the ideal team to make that New Orleans trade because they're trying to be bad anyway. So just waiting a year to draft somebody wouldn't really hurt you. So, yeah, if I were them, I would have made that New Orleans trade if that was on the table. But I also would have done that as literally any team between 8 and 12. So maybe not the best distinction. We got to talk about the Houston trade where they gave up 4 pretty good draft assets. It was the 2 Phoenix picks, or 3 Phoenix picks actually, and then the 1 Dallas pick essentially, where there's some least favorable language in 2029 for control of their pick in 2026 and 2027 back. I loved that trade for Brooklyn and I hated it for Houston when it happened. Now that we've gone through a year, I have totally flipped. The Nets gained 2 net draft slots out of that trade last year, going from Phoenix's pick to their own. Phoenix obviously came in at number 10, and then the Nets came in at number 8. Given the price that they paid, moving up 2 slots absolutely was not worth it. Now, if their own pick yields a top 3 selection next year in a draft with 3 bona fide stars, then that trade is worth it. If it doesn't, you start to look at that trade as like quietly a really, really bad decision for Brooklyn. When there was a scenario where if they had just waited out the next few years without their picks, they could have had all the Phoenix picks and all of the Knicks picks and that Dallas pick, and I think they have still a Philly pick. They could have been the most pick-rich team in the entire NBA. They rushed to regain control of their own picks. They have not netted enough value out of that. The other thing about the 5 picks they made this year was how much talent overlap there is, where it's not that they picked 5 rookies that it bothers me. It's not that any of the 5 specific rookies that they took bother me. It's that they're all kind of on ball guys and they're therefore probably going to diminish one another. That is kind of a questionable fit. We'll see if that works out. And then, of course, they should have traded Cam Johnson a year earlier. They should have traded Nick Claxton a year earlier. Letting themselves pick 8th was malpractice. That was a failure. I think they're being a lot smarter about that this year. Getting rid of Cam Johnson will help, but like if they pick eighth again, that trade is an utter disaster. So I broadly trust the direction. Like you've said, they did a very good job of accumulating value, both in the Durant and the Bridges trades. I am just kind of on them now because they have to use that value, like you said, to get a core player.
I defended the trade with the Rockets last year, and I still have to defend it. I just think there's too much uncertainty to be in that situation where you don't have your pick. So now you kind of have this motivation not to bottom out, and you don't know exactly. Yeah, now it's easy now to look at the Sun situation and say that they should have just kept those picks, but at that time that wasn't quite as clear. Like, yeah, the Suns lost to the Wolves, but they brought in Budenholzer. They were still going to try to be good. I think it's still better to have your control of your own picks, and especially in the Nets situation. Yes, they gave up more value. They traded like an additional pick. They're like net minus a pick after that trade, but they're in as good a position as any other team to do that type of trade. So I think it's just better to have control of your destiny. Yeah, it didn't look good this year, but we'll see how the next few ones look, and maybe they'll have another trade. Maybe they could do another trade with the Rockets because they don't have control of their pick in
Yeah,
2027.
that's what I was
That's
going
the
to
uh,
say.
that's the aspect where okay, maybe Houston could profit off that a little more. Um,
Yeah, like two Knicks picks
yeah,
for that one Nets pick or something.
but overall, I think we could agree they've kind of slowly dipped. I don't think they've slowly dipped from like maybe top elite tier to more like average. Which again, I
That's
still
where they're
think they're
ranked. Yeah.
yeah. I think they've still done a great job for the most part. But I think there's like a collective like yeah, I don't know. They clearly know what they're doing, but just not that inspiring. Hawks, most improved situation. You had them rank 26, moved them up to 16. I wrote about them. They won. I have these awards, front office awards. I gave the Hawks most improved situation. I mean, the Dyson Daniels trade, honestly, like that alone just changed everything. I think we can get past this one pretty quickly now, especially the biggest thing to just talk about is just the optimism of this new front office, what they've done in such a short amount of time. Everyone loves what they did as far as it really helped with the short term, but in the long run, they've done a lot of moves in the past few years with that getting Dyson. They had some luck getting the number one pick, getting Jalen Johnson panning out. Just a great turnaround situation considering where the Hawks were like even a year ago.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because some of the stuff that like led them to this point happened under Landry Fields, right? The second DeJounte Murray trade he made last offseason, and that was kind of what kickstarted this. The at the trade deadline, moving off of DeAndre Hunter helped them create the cap flexibility that ultimately got them Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard. Like some of the stuff that Landry Fields did ultimately worked out. He gets fired, but now the new group has been so good that it's like, oh, we're just going to sweep that under the rug. Porzingis, I thought, was a great buy low move for them. Alexander Walker and Kennard fit really perfectly. But the defining move is obviously the draft night trade. I'm going to say right now, like, I think that pick, just given NBA karma, is going to land in the top three and is going to get the Hawks the best player on their next really good team, right? Like, we think Trae Young is probably best suited as the second best guy in a good team, right? Like not somebody you should build everything around. Well, no, that now they no longer have to do that. Now we hope that pick is going to be high enough that like you can get somebody that you can kind of have on the timeline of your younger guys as your like developmental prospect who's going to be really promising while Trae Young keeps you competitive in the interim. I'm just very optimistic about where Atlanta is and if that pick yields the kind of player we think it can, kudos. You guys are right in the mix again.
So we're coming up on an hour and a half. I don't think we need to do too many more. Um, I want to ask you about two in particular: your
Yes.
biggest riser and your biggest faller.
Wasn't Atlanta my
That's not
biggest
the Hawks.
riser?
Yeah, that's not the Hawks. because coming up on 13, you had Miami in 6 months go from 4 to 13. How did you get there?
Truthfully, I sort of just regretted ranking Miami at 4 the first time. So much of that was in deference to their track record, which has been very, very good for a very, very long time. But you could start to see some of the cracks forming over the last several years. I overlooked them because of track record, but then I looked at Masai Ujiri, who I ranked too high. I looked at a few other teams where I was a little bit too high on them based on the track record and did not give enough thought to what they're doing in the present. And right now, man, I don't know what the Heat are doing. They have like a 500 or so roster. They are not positioned asset wise to trade for a star. Something to point out, we talk about the Heat as like the model star acquiring team in the NBA, aside from maybe the Lakers. They haven't traded for a star in 20 years. They traded for Shaq in 2004. Everything since then has been through free agency, but free agency for superstars doesn't really exist anymore. So I'm not sure how they plan to get their superstar because they don't have the assets to trade for that guy anymore. And I don't think somebody's going to force their way to Miami because there's just not enough talent on that team, right? Like, say you're Giannis and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to force my trade in the next 6 to 12 months. Why would he do it to go to Miami? Like, what's super appealing about that team for him, especially if they're giving up everything they have to get him? Why wouldn't he go to San Antonio or the Lakers or the Rockets or the Clippers or whatever? Like, there are just much better situations out there, more desirable from other warm weather cities. And I just look at the Heat, and something that really sticks out to me is how willing they are to throw away several seasons at a time just kind of hoping stuff will work out, and sometimes it does. They give away two seasons in 2008, 2009 to get the cap space for LeBron, and that obviously works. Great. They give away 3 seasons in the middle to end of last decade, 2016, 17, 18, and they do that to like thinking, oh, we have Deion Waiters and Kelly Olynyk, and we're going to re-sign all these guys, and eventually we'll just find a star, and Jimmy Butler falls in their laps. I don't think it's good business to just be comfortable being mediocre for a long time and assume we're the Heat, we're going to get somebody. I don't think they're going to just get somebody, right? I think it's going to have to be a little bit more active than that. And I just look at this situation and I go, why aren't the Heat just going to hover around 500 for several more years now? That's why I dropped them so much. I am just feeling very nervous about their long term outlook at this moment because I think their refusal to acknowledge where they actually are as a team is going to kill them. I think Pat Riley just looks at it and goes, we're the Heat. We don't tank. We don't trade stars, or like we don't trade our version of stars, which right now are Bam and Tyler Hero. We're not going to like admit that we're not in a good place. We are going to get somebody because we're the Heat. And I just feel like they haven't caught up with the times.
Yeah, it feels kind of Raptorsy the way things are heading, where they have this strategy that they lean on, but when it tends to work from time to time, but when it doesn't work and it doesn't work for a long time, there's some major downside. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just things just keep not happening and they drop even further more on your list. Um, Last one I want to touch on, the Pacers. I kind of feel like you having them 17th, it's kind of the same thing of you as you were saying with the Heat, that you think you had them too high. Yeah, they're probably a little too low in your February ranking. Um,
Yeah,
Even though
my
they're
you go ahead.
just because uh, they're certainly okay. They're a really great team. Yeah, there was some luck with the Cavs injuries, the Celtics injuries. Didn't have to face them, but I still think they could have still made the finals. That's how well this team was put together. They just went on an incredible string of home runs, with the biggest one being Tyrese Halliburton. Um, Getting Siakam for such a very small price. Um, they got Aaron Neesmith for Malcolm Brogdon. Like, you just look at everything. They got the draft pick for Andrew Nemhard in through the Victor Oladipo they turned into Karis LeVert who they turned into that draft pick. Like everything they did, they just nailed. And not only did they like you look at a team like the Magic where they made so many great decisions and it's all coming together. The Pacers are like a slightly better version of that, where the pieces, like, not only is a talent there, but the pieces fit together so well. So I think it's more so that this is just like a validation of moves that they've done in the past 3 years to get through this point. And even with the Miles Turner thing, if you want to separate, we're not separating ownership, but like I feel like that's kind of more where this is. I would imagine that if the front office could just give them whatever they want, they would. Um,
Okay. Let
but
me
I think overall, just everything they did leading up to the finals was just like maybe like arguably a top, elite front office, like top five ish territory.
I was prepared to rank them number 3 as of the morning of game 7 of the finals, and then the Miles Turner thing happened. But like first let me start with what I got wrong. I had them at 17 in the February rankings, thinking that it was kind of just they were a team that was comfortable winning 50 games, right? Where they had gotten Siakam and they had Halliburton, and I was just like, they're going to be a 5 seed in perpetuity. And I was just clearly wrong about that. They, even though they got some luck with the Cavs injuries and the Celtics injuries, they pushed the Thunder to 7, and I think there is a good chance that they would have beaten the Thunder if Halliburton hadn't gotten hurt. They had a championship caliber team. I was just wrong on just about every player on their team. They were just better than I thought they were. So that's why they were 17, and I was prepared to move them all the way up to number 3, given the incredible season that they've had since, or half season that they had after the last rankings. And then the Miles Turner thing happened. There would have been universes in which I would have been okay with them losing Miles Turner. If it was a sign and trade where they got a good return, I would have said, okay, I kind of see where you're getting at. If it had been part of a concerted effort to get younger, which I still think kind of makes sense, where they like trade Siakam to and they trade McConnell and they say, we understand that we're going to be without Halliburton for a year and he's going to be not himself in that first year back. And we want to get younger and divest ourselves of these older guys. That would have made sense to me as well. That is not what happened. What happened is they lost a good player for free. And I know what they said about, oh, he didn't respond to our offer. We were prepared to go deep into the tax to keep him. I just don't believe them. I don't think they've earned the benefit of the doubt, given the years of cheapness that team is engaged in. I think if Halliburton had been healthy, they would have gone into the tax for Turner. I think once Halliburton was healthy and they realized they weren't going to have several rounds of gate revenue in the playoffs, they were probably going to have less gate revenue in the regular season as well, and they weren't going to be championship contenders in the immediate term. They determined they weren't willing to pay the tax, and that was that. And even if they weren't willing to pay the tax, there were other things they could have done, right? Like they could have traded TJ McConnell, gotten far enough below the tax that they could have given out this contract, or some other player. Maybe it's Matherin, maybe it's Toppin. They had other ways where they didn't just have to lose this good player for nothing. I can't overlook that ownership's reluctance to spend. So I couldn't put them any higher than 7.
Yeah.
That being said, I think the people making basketball decisions there are as good as almost anybody in the league. The drafting is incredible. Like Andrew Nemhard in the second round speaks for itself. The second drafting, we talked about this with the Lakers, is very good too, where they're very intentional about the kinds of players they pull off of teams. Right? Aaron Nesmith with the Celtics. It wasn't he was playing badly, it's that he was barely playing. Obi Toppin was the same thing. Tom Thibodeau doesn't play his backups. So he was stuck behind Julius Randle. That didn't mean he was bad. That just meant circumstances were keeping him off the floor. That's the sort of guy that they've targeted in that range, and they've been very, very successful with them. And unlike the Lakers, they set themselves up to keep these diamonds in the rough, right? They've been able to re-sign Nesmith and re-sign Toppin and re-sign Nemhard at good value. This is just a team that's very good at identifying talent, and that's probably the best trait that a single front office can have.
Yeah, especially given their financial the financial limitations they impose on themselves. They they work amazingly within them. They have over the past 25 years. They've always managed to stay relevant, and whether or not that's to their benefit or their detriment, you can make a case throughout the past few decades where maybe they should have not gone for it every single time, maybe taken more of a step back. Even this mini rebuild that they did, going away from the Sabonis era, it was a pretty quick retool, um, but they got all the players that they need in a very quick amount of time that could normally take teams like way longer, 2 3 times the amount of time to get that level of talent. And so definitely a little bit of luck. They worked with some of the moves they made involved teams that are much lower on this list, but it all worked out.
Spurs are the
Anything
king of
else?
that, right?
Huh?
Of making trades with bad teams. The Spurs are the absolute king of that. The Spurs are ultimately ranked number 3 on this list. But if you look at the trades they've made, it's like, well, yeah, of course, every trade they make is with the Kings and the Bulls.
Yeah, especially last year, they did 2 trades altogether within a year. Any other team you want to touch on? Because we're coming up on an hour 40. For the most part, I think, I'm with you on most of these rankings.
Yeah, the one I want to just the one that people always push back on me, I just either defend me or go against me. I had Utah at number 8. I had them as high as number 5 in February. I think that was a few slots too high, but like we just generally trust their plan, right? Like Danny Ainge has proven that he can build winners. He's not going to deviate from his plan. He's not going to get skittish. He's not going to let ownership make him do something stupid. We just generally like the things that they're doing.
Yeah, I loved what as soon as Danny Ainge came in 2022, what they got for Rudy, what they got for Mitchell. Um, a lot of it is this is probably the most, hey, look at this guy's track record ranking. I don't, are they this high? Maybe I would say I like Philly, Memphis a little more going forward, but I wouldn't deviate too much. The lack of players is concerning, as in like players that they drafted, like to not really have, like they've got Walker Kessler's probably a starter level player. Uh, that's it. That we like as that's the only certainty we can say right now based on their draft record. So it is kind of concerning that we're now they've done 3 drafts. We had 3 years and just not a lot of results. But well, I'm kind of with you. We're like, yeah, I still kind of trust the plan. Some maybe they just got extremely unlucky. We know there's some injuries with Taylor Hendricks, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah, I mean the things that I
yeah,
disagree with is I don't think they just should have traded guys faster. Like Markkinen was the obvious example of this, where they could have gotten so much when he was on a $20 million salary. Now that he's at the max, I just don't think there's a good offer out there
yeah,
for him. And then there were the guys this offseason, like Sexton, they gave up for nothing. Clarkson, they bought out. Collins, they gave up for basically nothing. Like if they move those guys earlier, they probably get more value, but I trust the plan, right? And the drafting has been an
yeah,
issue. The Cody Williams pick thus far looks very, very bad. Taylor Hendricks got hurt out of their control. Like, I think there's some promise though, like Isaiah Collier, Keontae George, Kyle Filipowski, are like guys who I think are NBA players. But the next few years are going to be very, very telling. If they don't have like maybe it's Ace Bailey, maybe it's somebody else they draft. If they don't have somebody we look at as a possible franchise guy,
yeah.
then you can start to get a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, if they don't get a franchise guy soon, and a lot of that isn't totally in their control. Like, thankfully, you can't. I don't think you could look back at the past 3 drafts and say, "Wow, I can't believe the Jazz missed out on this guy," because they weren't drafting high enough. Now they drafted fifth, and they took arguably the highest upside guy. So we'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised if the longer this goes, they start to have like the Brooklyn effect where they slowly start to drop down to like maybe more towards average.
Yeah.
Um, All right, Sam, this was fun. I think we touched on the
Speaking
most interesting
rankings, by the way, to
teams.
be clear, so we didn't talk on
Yeah.
every. All right.
Yeah.
We did everything up to like 16, so I'll just read the top half. Number one, Oklahoma City. Number two, Boston. Number three, San Antonio. Number four, Houston. Number five, Cleveland. Number six, New York. Number seven, Indiana. Number eight, Utah. Number nine, Philly. Number 10, Memphis. Number 11, Minnesota. Number 12, the Clippers. 13, Heat. 14, Golden State. 15, Orlando.
Yeah. They're all pretty either average to elite. I think the team that as I looked through, I'm like, wow, they're number 5 is Cleveland. Not that I had any doubts, but it kind of caught me by surprise because I was a lot more down on them
The
over the
potential
past,
stuff I had questions about, for sure.
and especially that Donovan Mitchell trade. I didn't feel like they were quite ready to do that. And no, Evan Mobley and Garland were just that good. Where,
We know the
yeah,
other
that
thing about Cleveland that
one of
we
the very few all-in trades that truly worked out.
the thing about Cleveland too, we don't give them credit because he wasn't on the team that long. They figured out Lauri Markkanen. They were the team that gave him the offer sheet or the sign and trade when nobody else wanted him. Kudos for that as well. I like their drafting. Obviously, Evan Mobley is a no-brainer at 3, but they weren't afraid to take back-to-back best player available guards in Sexton and Garland, and they let that kind of figure itself out organically. Dean Wade has been a very good margin find. They've done a lot of good work on the
Yes,
Ty
a
Jerome as well.
lot of good work on the margins.
Yeah, like I was a little surprised when I had them that high as well. But I mean, they won 64 games for a reason. That wasn't a fluke. That's not a
Yeah,
situation where, like, oh, a big market team signed a star free agent and then traded for his buddy who had the same agent. I'm not talking about any team in particular. And then good things happened.
yeah,
No, the team was built totally organically and was incredible.
yeah. All right, Sam, let's wrap it up. I have no central AC. I'm burning up.
Oh, you poor thing.
No, it just stopped working, and we have to put a fan in my son's room, and now I'm boiling up. So,
Oh, well, I wish you the best of luck. Fortunately, you don't live in that hot a climate. Los Angeles isn't that hot in the middle of the summer, is it?
um, I live in the San Fernando Valley. I don't know if what you know about that, but it gets
Doesn't it like way hotter there?
this is like one of the hotter areas of
Oh,
LA County. So, yeah, I'm just sweat. The bottom of my thighs are just swampy right now.
I am so cold in my air conditioned apartment that I'm wearing long sleeves. See,
Ah,
I'm
no,
very.
I don't know what's going on. My AC just the central AC just stopped working, and got to get someone in tomorrow to check it out.
But you have
But
fun with that. I'll enjoy my
yeah,
67-degree apartment.
everyone, make sure you're following Sam on Twitter at Sam Quinn CBS. Read CBS Sports. Read all his work there, including the rankings that we just went over. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at and Blue Sky at my name Yossi Goslin. Subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to the Third Apron newsletter. I'm gonna have a lot of good, interesting stuff. Like tomorrow, I'm going to talk about Luca's upcoming extension,
Oh, me
and
too. Are we publishing on the same day?
I guess yeah, I'm publishing tomorrow, but I'm gonna get more into like the Lakers' actual cap space plans, their 27 plan, because I never really looked into it. I know like they could have a lot of cap space in 2026. Can they actually get the cap space for Jokic and Giannis in 2027? Short answer, yeah, and I'll show how.
Yeah, I'm writing about that on Monday after the inevitable extension. So we looks like we're gonna have some topic overlap.
Yeah, no, it's like I did the projection, like they could actually pull it off. I mean, can't if it actually happened, that's a whole
You're
nother.
talking about one, right? You're not talking about both. I haven't looked
Just
into
getting
that.
one of them, yeah. They can put the money together, but like doesn't mean that this doesn't mean anything unless one of them actually want to come.
No, I think what we both think is Giannis gets traded next summer and Jokic just extends. But it's a fun conversation.
Yeah. Either way, Lakers they have a plan, and I'll show how what that plan is. All right,
All right.
Sam. And then yeah, that's everything, guys. Thanks, and we'll probably oh, Sam and I we're gonna have some fun stuff coming up. We have some ideas for August some fun stuff, nothing too serious because it's August. You know, we'll save the serious stuff for when basketball, when training camp